All right, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It's time for some meta predictions because we got two big tournaments this weekend. We got Joinville and Dortmund Regionals. So two massive tournaments in the Stellar Crown format. And I think it's time to do my meta predictions as to what I think is going to do well at the tournament, what decks might win the tournament, what deck will top 8, meta percentages, flops, all that stuff I'm going to talk about within today's video. And I'm excited because, I mean, with two tournaments, I got double the odds to predict things right. So hopefully my predictions come true, but we'll have to see on that one. But yeah, I don't think Joinville's being streamed. I know Dortmund's being streamed though, for sure. So that one's going to be exciting to watch. And this will have an impact on Kentucky and LAIC because this format is Stellar Crown. Of course, LAIC, Kentucky will both be in Stellar Crown too, so a lot to digest here. And if y'all are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 18,000 subscribers. And let me know in the comments below what your predictions are for this weekend. Let me know in the comments. So starting things off here, we got Charizard. So I've kind of put Charizard as like the big deck right now. I'm pretty sure Charizard's going to be the best deck for this weekend. Now, I'm going to be honest, I think Charizard is going to win one of the two regionals. And the regional that I think it's going to win is Joinville Regionals. Now, Joinville's in Brazil. Brazil is the place that invented Arvinzard, right? Arvinzard got created in Brazil because everyone before Arvinzard was trying to make Charizard work with all these other cards like Arceus V-Star and stuff, Lost Zone, Charizard, like all these random piles, when in fact the best way to play Charizard is to just use Arvin. So I'm pretty sure Charizard is going to win Brazil. Pretty good chance. I know there's a good chance that Pedro Paducci and his crew are all going to be on Zard. They're going to innovate with the Briar Zard a little bit, and I think Charizard has a pretty good chance of winning Joinville. I think there's going to be at least 2 or 3 Charizard in top 8 at Joinville Regionals. That's my first prediction right there. But Dortmund, I think Charizard will do well, but I don't think Charizard is going to do as well as in Joinville. So I think in Dortmund, we'll see a Charizard in top 16. I don't think there's going to be a Charizard in top 8 in Dortmund, just because Dortmund, I feel like EU usually tends to play like the more stall control stuff. Like I feel like Charizard has more target on his back going into Dortmund than it does Joinville. So I think that's kind of where I'm looking at it right now. But I am going to be interested to see where Charizard goes this weekend and if anyone can like innovate with the list a little bit, especially in Joinville, because I'm pretty sure we're going to see a Charizard potentially win the tournament there. But Dragapult is also, you know, in a pretty good spot right now. I think Dragapult's the other big hyped up Stage 2 EX deck, and I think Dragapult's in a decent spot. Now, I don't think Dragapult is going to win a tournament. I think Dragapult will make top 16 in either Joinville or Dortmund. That's my prediction. I think Dragapult's still good. Maybe we haven't figured out a good 60 for it yet or the best 60 for it, but I'm excited to see what list for Dragapult can be made. I know that Zardpult is a thing that I want to make happen again. I don't know if Tord is going to be playing Zardpult again, obviously, but maybe somebody will make day 2 with like a Charizard Dragapult deck. I'm not sure the deck is as good in this format as it was the previous format in Twilight Masquerade, but we'll have to see on that one. I'm interested to see where Dragapult goes after this weekend because I want to see Dragapult do well, and I want to see somebody maybe make a decent run with it. At least a top 16 would be it for Dragapult. Now, Raging Bolt is an interesting one. So, Bolt has been getting all the rage. It won the Champions League in Tokyo. So, immediately, everyone's kind of given more attention to this deck. It's probably the best and most aggressive turbo deck in the format. It also gets Briar, which can be pretty big, especially against Charizard. So, I think Raging Bolt is going to be pretty popular. I know a lot of people have said that Raging Bolt is going to be like a big percentage of the meta. I mean, I can see Raging Bolt being like probably 10 to 12% of the meta in Dortmund and or in Joinville. I don't think Raging Bolt is going to do that well, though. Like, maybe we'll see 1 or 2 in top 16 in both those regionals, but I don't think Raging Bolt is a deck that's going to win a regional. Like, I don't think this deck wins a regional this weekend. But you know what? If, you know, it maybe one might make top 8, maybe. That's a big maybe. Because I think it's interesting because, like, in Baltimore, Raging Bolt was, like, one of the most popular decks. The day 2 conversion rate was terrible for the deck. Like, it completely fell off after that day 2 conversion rate. So that's like a big deal. And I mean, similar thing could happen. I know the meta's a bit different now for Raging Bolt, and especially now that it's Briar. I still don't think Raging Bolt is going to like, it's not going to convert that well in my opinion, right? It's also a very linear deck. I think that it being so linear is kind of an issue for the deck because there's less skill expression with the deck. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think Raging Bolt is as good as everyone's making it out to be, but I guess my prediction for Charizard, if Charizard's going to be the biggest deck, I think in Joinville, Charizard's going to be like at least 12 to 13% of the meta. In Dortmund, Charizard might be like 8 to 9% of the meta. There's my prediction. So yeah, Raging Bolt and Charizard are going to be the 2 of the most popular decks this weekend. I mean, we'll see if Raging Bolt ends up being more than 10%. I think it's possible for sure at one of the two regionals, so we'll have to see. And then, of course, we got the Terapagos Dusknoir deck. Now, this deck has gained so much hype over the past week that this deck, I think, is 100% going to make a splash this weekend at one of the two regionals. I would say maybe Dortmund is where this deck's probably going to have the most success. But this deck definitely feels like it's in a really good spot right now within our format, and I definitely would not be surprised if somebody made top 8 with this deck. That's my main prediction. This deck has been getting so much hype. I think somebody's going to back up that hype with the Terapagos Dusknoir deck, and they're going to make a top 8 run with this deck. I think at one of the two regionals, Dortmund or Joinville, I think we're going to see a Terapagos Dusknoir deck in top 8. I think the deck's hype is going to warrant its success. Now, since it's getting so much hype, how much play is it actually going to see? I mean, I could see this deck maybe getting like 6% of the meta in one of the two tournaments. Like, the deck is a little bit too new, in my opinion, for, like, it to be that popular. Like, I don't think this is going to be the third most popular deck. It'll probably be in, like, the top 5-ish. It'll be on the day one graphic for one of the two regionals, but I don't think it's going to be the most popular deck. I think it's too new. I don't think anyone's figured out the best 64 yet, which is going to hold it back, but I do think there's going to be enough players playing it that there's a chance one of these Terapagos decks will make top 8 at one of the two regionals. Regidrago is another deck that has been quietly, like, falling off a little bit. Even though it isn't actually falling off, I think the deck's actually still pretty good. It's just less players playing it. And I think Drago is still in a good spot this weekend. I think Regidrago is still a very powerful deck that I think people should still respect regardless of the tournament. There's a good chance Drago is going to make a top 8 run in one of the two tournaments. In fact, Drago is another deck that I wouldn't be surprised if it won one of the regionals. Now, I said Charizard could win Joinville. I think Drago could also win Joinville, though, especially if Charizard is super popular and a lot of the big Brazil players, play that Briarzard deck. I think Drago has a good chance of winning Joinville, too. But I do think Drago is another deck that we'll see in top 8. I wouldn't be surprised if it won one of the tournaments, too. It's a good chance Drago could win a tournament. It's still very, very powerful. I think it's underrepresented right now, which I think is a big deal for the deck. I think the fact that there's not as much people playing it right now is a good thing for the deck because I guess there's less people expecting it, if that makes any sense. I mean, we'll have to see. I feel like the meta's getting a little bit more hostile, though, towards Drago, because Drago used to be, like, one of the only decks in the format, other than Lugia, that really wanted to go first. But now there's, like, Terapagos. I've even seen Dragapult going first. Palkia goes first. Like, there's too many decks going first now that it does kind of hurt Drago's, like, consistency with that, but Drago is still a really strong deck. And like I said, it's another deck that I think sneakily is going to make a top 8, potentially even win one of the regionals. And then, of course, Gardevoir, another deck that's quietly, like, under the radar like Drago is. Both these two decks are kind of not falling off, but seeing less play. Gardevoir does feel like it's in a really good spot this weekend, especially with all the Charizard going around. My issue with Gardevoir, though, is I think Gardevoir is actually underrated right now. I think the issue is dealing with these Dusknoir decks. I think Dusknoir is a big problem for Gardevoir. Though Gardevoir still seems really strong. I don't think Gardevoir is in a bad spot at all. It's another deck that, much like Regidrago, could make a run in a tournament and make it to top 8. I think the old version of the deck with, like, the Devo and, like, the slower approach with Klefki Fluttermane is probably going to be the main way Gardevoir is going to see play this weekend over the Turbo build. Since Drago isn't as popular, I do think eventually one Gardevoir will make top 8. I don't know what regional, but I would predict money that, yeah, Guardy could make a top 8 in either Dortmund or Joinville. Probably Dortmund, to be honest. I could see Gardevoir getting top 8 in Dortmund for sure. But yeah, Gardevoir, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody made top 8. I don't think it's going to be heavily played. I do think there is going to be at least that one Gardevoir player that has a really deep run in a tournament. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if Gardevoir made top 8 at all. Palkia is another deck that is getting a bit of hype right now. Is it as good as Terapagos Dusknoir? Probably not, but I think Palkia is still a deck somebody's going to bring to a tournament and do well with. I don't know if Palkia will make top 8, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody made top 16 with Palkia at Joinville or Dortmund. Joinville. that's not a place, but you get my point, right? So I think Palkia has a chance of making top 16 at one of these regionals. I just don't know if we've even figured out a good 60 for it. That's, like, kind of my issue. I've seen a lot of different builds of Palkia. I don't know if anyone's figured out a good 60 for it. That's probably the problem with Palkia right now. But I think Palkia is a deck that definitely can make a top 16 run in a tournament. I don't know about top 8, but we'll have to see on that one. Now, Lugia. Now, I've said this before with Guardian Regidrago. It's another deck that I feel like less players are actively thinking about right now. Also, I don't know if anyone's really checking for Lugia. The only deck playing Temple of Sinnoh is either Drago or Dragapult. And I'm okay with that because those two decks I don't think are going to be as popular as stuff like Charizard and Raging Bolt and Terapagos are. So I think Lugia has a great chance of having a good run this weekend. Lugia hasn't won a regional like yet. I don't think like not in a while. So I'm not sure it's going to win a tournament because like history keeps repeating itself where it keeps getting farmed in the finals. But I can definitely see Lugia making a good run. At least one of these two tournaments. There's going to be one Lugia in top 8. Yeah. It's Lugia, right? I think the deck kind of just gets potentially better with this format, or worse. I don't know, or it stays the same. My issue with Lugia, obviously, Cinccino is very good, but Cinccino is very susceptible to Dusknoir. Dusknoir is very popular right now. That's one of the things holding me back from wanting to play Lugia myself, is like, oh, but Dusknoir is kind of an issue for the deck now. Also, Briar makes things even more awkward for Lugia, but I think Lugia is still in a pretty good spot, and I think that there's a good chance we could see a Lugia make it to top 8 at one of the two tournaments. Next up is Quad Thorns. I hate to break it to you, Quad Thorns is not in a bad spot right now as like a control disruption deck. I think we could see Quad Thorns have a top 8 in either Joinville or Dortmund. It's possible. It's definitely a deck that could make it to top 8. I mean, we saw it at Worlds, and we could see it happen again. But we'll have to see on that one. Thorns definitely just feels like, because we're in this like new meta where everyone's trying out different things, a deck like Quad Thorns would usually succeed in that type of meta because nobody's really like building the optimal 60s right now, or nobody's really even like thinking of stuff like the Quad Thorns, which is good. But that also kind of leads me into my next point with like Control and Snorlax. I think Control's gonna be really good. I'm not gonna be surprised if one of the big Control players does really good at the Dortmund Regionals. So very good chance we're gonna see a Control deck do good in Dortmund. I don't know about Joinville, but if Charizard's big in Joinville, there's a good chance Pidgeot Control could do well. But I definitely think that in Dortmund, Pidgeot is gonna have a good run for sure. I think Pidgeot's gonna do good at Dortmund. I don't know about like a top 8 run, but like a top 16 would not surprise me, or like potentially. Yeah, like top 16. Yeah, I don't know what else I was gonna say there, but yeah, Control seems pretty good. It's another Snorlax and Control just kind of feel like these decks where like they're very strong. I think Snorlax is a great candidate for another deck that generally could do good at Dortmund, even top 8. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Snorlax got top 8 in Dortmund also, but it just feels like with Snorlax and Control, the format is like unrefined right now. People are just not finding the best 60s for what they want to play. So decks like Snorlax and Pidgey Control and Quad Thorns naturally will do better because they're preying on these unrefined or like super optimal 60 lists. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I look at it. I also think Snorlax is not being respected right now. That's another big deal. Snorlax does have to deal with Dusknoir, which is not great for the deck. Also, Pidgey Control also has to deal with Dusknoir, which are kind of ops for the deck. But I definitely think that both Pidgey Control and Snorlax are actually in a decent spot this weekend. And I would not be surprised if, Snorlax got top 8 in Dortmund or even Joinville. There's a good chance Snorlax could get top 8 in Joinville. And I think Pidgeot Control definitely could get top 16 in Dortmund or Joinville. Probably Dortmund, though, if I had to guess. Palkia Dusknoir is another deck from last format that I think could carry over. This might be better than the Palkia Noctowl deck because Noctowl Palkia does have a lot of advantages. Noctowl gives you super consistent advantages with like Prime Catcher Clone and stuff, but Palkia Dusknoir has the advantage of the aggressiveness of Dusknoir, and I think Palkia Dusknoir could be just a stronger build of Dusknoir, but could also be a weaker build of Terapagos Dusknoir. So I think looking at the deck, you kind of have to consider which one you think is just overall better for the tournament. But I think Palkia Dusknoir is not in a bad spot. I think somebody's going to play it, make a day 2, maybe make a top 32 run with it in Joinville or Dortmund. That's my prediction. Roaring Moon is another deck from the last format that quietly I think is still not a bad deck right now. It's still aggressive. It still goes kaboom. My issue with Moon could be something like Briar could be an issue for the deck. But I don't think Moon's in a bad spot. I think, Moon's another deck that I wouldn't be surprised if one made top 8. It's Moon at the end of the day. It just goes fast, does its thing. And in this meta where going first is becoming a little bit more common now, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody maybe had a deep run with Moon and maybe got top 8 in Joinville or Dortmund. Now, Miraidon. Now, look, Miraidon is fine. I think it's the weakest link of the big turbo decks, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody maybe made like a top 16 run with Miraidon, maybe top 32. I don't think Miraidon's in a great spot going this weekend. I don't think Miraidon's going to do well in Joinville at all. I think Dortmund, though, we might see a Miraidon in top 32, maybe top 16 if we're being kind. But I just think Miraidon's falling off recently with like how popular it was at the beginning of the format. Now I think Miraidon's kind of trickling a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Miraidon like flopped. And then Lost Box. So another deck that I think is getting a bit better right now. Lost Box feels like it's a deck that could succeed in this format. That's because Regidrago is falling off in play rate. Now, I'm not saying Drago's falling off in general. Like, if Drago wins Dortmund and Joinville, all of a sudden Drago's the best deck for Kentucky, and then Lost Box completely dies off. But going to these tournaments, because Drago is falling down a little bit in popularity, its meta share is shrinking, a deck like Lost Box definitely can start to come back into the format. And I think that's going to be a big thing. Now, Lost Box does have to deal with stuff like Dusknoir, which isn't great for it, but I think, like, if you can turbo Sableye, I think Sableye is broken in Lost Box because you can KO Duskulls really easily. No one's playing Jirachi. No one's really respecting Sableye. And then you just have to have, like, Hands or Moon in the deck, and you're probably chilling. Like, I definitely would not be surprised if somebody had a deep run in Dortmund or Joinville with a Lost Box deck, specifically Turbo. But Sablezard's also, like, kind of the unsung warrior of Lost Box. This is, like, considered the best way to play it, but I think Turbo's probably fine to play now due to the fact that the meta's kind of, you know, not playing Drago anymore, right? Because Sablezard's better than Drago than Turbo is. No, you know, they're still close either way. But the one thing I'll say about Sablezard is Radiant Charizard is still a great attacker right now. And, you know, you do play the double Sableye, so you're still like a very heavily Sableye deck, which I think Sableye is still a very important card to play right now within the format. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody had a good run with Sablezard in Joinville or Dortmund. I think one Lost Box deck will do decent in one of these two tournaments, just because I feel like Lost Box is primed for a bit of a comeback this weekend. Ancient Box, I think, is falling off quite a bit. I would not be surprised if Ancient Box, like, flops, because my issue with Ancient Box is it's just not great in the turbos. I mean, there's, like, you know, Dusknoir is really bad for the deck. Like, Tropico's Dusknoir will, like, Dusknoir your Greninja, the Liono you, the one-shot your Moon. Like, Ancient Box feels really weak right now. Briar's another big problem for the deck. I think Briar, honestly, might kill this deck off, to be honest with you. I do think there's a good chance Briar kills off Ancient Box. Because, like, how do you beat Charizard now that they have Briar? You already didn't beat them before, but now you're, like, even more screwed. And also, like, Raging Bolt, another matchup that's supposed to be good for the deck, is now a little bit more difficult because they have Briar. So, like, I feel like Ancient Box just kind of falls off this weekend. I don't think it's a good play at all. I think Ancient Box is a dying deck. I don't think it's going to be very popular, and I don't think we're going to see an Ancient Box do good. Goldengo, I said this in my tier list video. It's another deck that just randomly happens to do good at a tournament. Wouldn't be surprised if somebody made top 64 with the Dengo. Dengo's not bad. I mean, it's still, like, those Dengo things. It doesn't really gain anything, though, with, like, the new set or anything. I don't think it gains any, like, good matchups. It just kind of stays Goldengo, you know what I mean? And then, of course, I want to talk about the Stahl Noivern Cornerstone deck, which I guess we could have classified as, like, Stahl, like, before. But this deck, I think, is not very good. I think it was really only good for Baltimore, and I think post-Baltimore, going into the Stellar Crown format, this deck dives off. You know, Dusknoir's popularity, Dragapult, stuff like that. Cornerstone Ogerpon does not seem very good right now, and I think that's kind of a problem for the deck. I don't think this deck is going to do great this weekend. I'm not sure we're going to see one do well. I think at that point, just play Pidgey Control or Snorlax, or even Quad Thorns, right? Play one of those three type of decks. You know, just, I can't see this deck doing as good. I want to mention Shempao, another deck that's fallen off a little bit, but Shempao's a deck that, you know, you never know could do well at a tournament. We'll have to see on that, though. Somebody might make day 2 with it. I just don't see Shempao having, like, a deep run. Shempao also feels like it's just, like, a dying archetype. Dusknoir is really bad for the deck. Dragapult, stuff like that. Just, it doesn't feel like Shempao's in a great spot anymore in the format. Now, I do have a couple wild cards. So I want to mention Palafin real quick. I would love to see somebody get day 2 with Palafin. Palafin did get second place in a big online tournament. I did a video on it. It's actually not a bad deck right now. Palafin can trade pretty well into some big Pokemon. I want to see somebody make a good run with Palafin in one of these tournaments. Maybe a top 64 with Palafin. My prediction right now is Palafin's going to make day 2 at a regional this weekend. That's one of my wild card predictions. My other wild card prediction is Reggie's. I love Reggie's, and I want somebody to do well with Reggie's this weekend. So one of my predictions is also somebody's going to have a good run with Reggie's this weekend. I want to hear somebody make a day 2 of the Reggie's. I want that to happen. I want somebody to figure out a good Reggie 60 so I can play one of my favorite decks of all time again in this format. So I want to see somebody make day 2 with Reggie's. That's my wild card prediction. Palafin and Reggie's is my 2 wild card picks. But there you go, folks. That is my predictions for the tournament. Like I said, I think Charizard and Regidrago are 2 decks that would not surprise me that they won. Snorlax could also win a regional. Like, Snorlax, Drago, and Charizard are decks that I definitely can see winning the tournament. I do think Charizard has a high chance of winning Joinville, and then I think that there's a good chance that, you know, Raging Bolt might have a good day 1, but day 2 is going to flop. Tropicos, I think we're going to see one Tropicos Dusknoir in top 8 in one of these regionals. And then also, I do think something like Regidrago, like I said, it's going to kind of go under the radar, but then I think somebody's going to have a good run with it, and then we'll see a Drago in top 8, or potentially win one of the regionals, another deck that could win. And since, like, Dortmund seems to like control stuff, I definitely could see Pidgey Control or Snorlax in top 8, and then maybe Snorlax even winning one of the regionals. That's definitely something that could very well happen, especially because nobody's really respecting Snorlax right now. I want to see Palkia maybe have a top 16 run. Gardevoir wouldn't surprise me if this made top 8 too. And then obviously, like, the Dragapult deck maybe could make top 8. I could see Dragapult going high, like not as high as top 16, but top 8, would be kind of cool for Dragapult to get there. But there you go. Those are my meta predictions for Joinville and Dortmund. I'm excited this weekend, man. I want to see what happens. I want to see what decks win, what makes top 8, what new archetypes even come out of the woodwork. I know there's like maybe other decks out there like Zorg, V-Star, and stuff that maybe people wanted me to talk about, but those decks have not performed online yet, so I can't really say anything about them. But maybe somebody will figure out a good 60 this weekend. It's possible. I'm excited for all it to happen. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below what your predictions are for this weekend. And yeah, if you're new to the channel, subscribe down below. We're on the road to 18K subs, and I'll catch you on another video over here very soon on the second channel. Bye-bye.